so Musk, he's fulfilling, I guess to get back to the Watchmen and kind of Musk role.
Yeah.
Musk, like we were talking about earlier, this JFK killing of the king, we talked about Abraham Lincoln's phallus. What was JFK's phallus? Was the phallus at the Kennedy Space Center, the space race that Kennedy started in the Great Cold War between when the world was a bipolar, and there's two superpowers. In order to defeat them, we had to win the space race. So JFK starts the space race. It's fulfilled after his death. Finally, after all this oppressive, horrible stuff, MLK killed, JFK killed, Martin Luther King killed.
Everybody,
really hit it on the head there.
Right.
But so the whole population traumatized, and then we finally have a win. Oh wow, we beat them in the space race. We went to the moon.
Right.
All from the Kennedy Space Center. So yeah, Apollo 11 was Kennedy's dick, and it would be a lot harder to convince the American people that that it happened if not for the emotional trauma and the hole that was caused by the assassination of JFK, which now Elon Musk, eventually, he basically is the successor to that legacy, and as a part of Trump's administration, much like RFK Jr. So you see, there's like 4 different levels that all tie into the same sacrifice, the same emotional trauma.
Yeah. Is that where you see his place with Trump, with Elon? Like, is he part of? Is he good, do you think? Is there such a thing as good? Because we can go into Watchmen with the idea of good and evil, but
everything's good for some people and bad for other people. There's never been a good time in history or a bad time in history. It's been good for some people, bad for some people, maybe better for a majority of people, in some ways worse. Would you rather be a peasant who at least gets to hang out with his family all day and have actual good work and be happy in general? Or would you rather, have nothing to do, have all your kids be depressed, kill themselves, cut their dicks off?
Seriously.
And, the stuff that we see today, there's always, people have this idea of technology advancing, equating to a better life in general, or things improving. Yeah, some things are improving, but other things, there's balance in the world. There's yin and yang. So this idea of good and bad. Yes, Elon is good. I like his shit. I think went by a Cybertruck today. That shit's dope.
Yeah. It is. But it looks awesome.
It's, I like Twitter. Thank God he bought Twitter. If they left that alone, I'd be done. I wouldn't have a fucking income at all if they took away Twitter. So, I'm happy that he did it. It's definitely good for me. But I guess it's just important at the core of everything, like we talked about earlier, is the only thing that you actually have control over. And I think this is where the real question of free will goes to, is on a decentralized basis. Yes, each individual person has free will, but on a mass basis, the centralization of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Mm-hmm. So there's, you can't really change, in certain ways you can, but you can't really change what goes on overall. You can't stop the precession of the equinox or these cycles from playing out. You can try. Right. But all you can do is position yourself correctly by being informed. And this actually goes back to the same myth of Horus, Osiris, and Set. Is when Horus is resurrected and fights Set, goes to defeat him after he killed Osiris, he was assisted, actually both sides, both Set and Horus, were assisted by the god of knowledge, Thoth. Which the Greeks called Hermes, and is basically the same. He represents esoteric knowledge. He represents all these things we're talking about, astrology and subconscious programming. It's all esoteric thought at the end of the day. Sigmund Freud, where we get propaganda from, is we have Sigmund Freud, his great nephew Edward Bernays writes the book Propaganda in 1928, and it basically public relations comes out of that. Advertising and the Nazi, the whole cult of personality the Nazis were created were based off of these same methods of Bernays, the advertising methods that played off of his great uncle's work, which affects the subconsciousness. And then you have Edward Bernays' great uncle, which I believe it's Mark Randolph, who's the co-founder of Netflix.
No.
So really? He's in the Bernays family. So you have the primary centralized form of propaganda is now happens to be run by the guy who wrote the propaganda book. So, and that just goes to show you these technocrats, it's complete bullshit. What happens is they have technology that is far superior to everyone else that they developed through the DARPA. Take, for instance, they had a project called LifeLog in the early 2000s, which was the idea that you could trick the population into giving you all their personal information so you didn't have to collect it. And what happened is they had Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, right. Wow. He came up with Facebook to get girls in college. Whoa,
we make a movie about you.
Movie about it. Oh, how cool. Oh, wow. What a great guy. Anyways, LifeLog shut down the day that Facebook was incorporated, and then all the employees from LifeLog went and worked.
Is that so?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Literally the same day, the exact same day. So they weren't trying to hide it. And then when you approach the, I believe the DARPA Twitter account, some intern was running it and people like pointed that out to them. It's one of the things I believe QAnon talked about it in a post specifically.
Right.
But they're the guys, if you're working in the same industry, of course DARPA is just going to have them go work. Well, it's comical. It's absolutely. Oh, Jeff Bezos, his grandfather.
I know that one.
Like the co-founder of DARPA.
Yeah.
Like one of the
that one's crazy too.
Ran the shit. So it's comical when you actually like zoom out. Bill Gates, of course, only got the huge $1 million IBM contract that started. Of course, IBM worked with the Nazis. Crazy corrupt industry.
Yep. Little known fact. People don't know the IBM Holocaust connection so much. I forget the name of that book. And they got the IBM computer. I think it's at the museum in DC. But it like helped compute and find the Jews, I guess, to bring into the camps.
Provided tech support the whole way through the war.
Right.
Just, are you having problems with your Holocaust camp programs? And of course, I think the word Holocaust, this is another fun fact, is it means complete burnt offering. So it's a sacrifice. It's a burnt sacrifice.
That's all this is. We're stuck in a revolving door of sacrifices carried out by crazy individuals. Epstein,
for instance, the day that the Holocaust was started was on, in the Jewish calendar, it's called the 9th of Av.
Okay.
It's the 9th day of their 11th month. And it's the day that they solemnly commemorate the falling of the two temples. You had Solomon's temple that was destroyed by the Babylonian Empire.
Right.
And then you had the second temple, Herod's temple, which was destroyed by the Romans. And just so happens, so this 9th of Av, it obviously the date in our calendar changes every year. Just so happens that Epstein killed himself on the 9th of Av, 2019. And so I guess as a fun side note, is Epstein was basically used as a sacrifice in order to create the QAnon lore behind Trump. Epstein killing himself basically was the huge, and what the attention that brought basically gave all the power to Trump to really make him seem as the opposition to the established order. But
right.
I forget what we were talking about. If you want to refocus,
we were on Elon and we were on Von Braun. I was going to go into there's so many directions I want to go with this, but thinking of first, I guess we'll go here first. It's laughable how all this stuff seems to be carried out by the people that are hidden throughout the eras, in societies, but everything they do, they carry out so publicly. And I was laughing because it seems like it's so on the nose sometimes that, we can laugh about it. It's so ridiculous. But it's almost like it's set up to make us seem ridiculous to others who don't want to buy into it, right? Is that part? Do you think that's part of why they do it so brazen? Like Caesar's in public, JFK in public. All these things are so public, and then or 9/11, and they play it over and over until it's like, your memory just becomes like it's a VCR on a loop. Is that, you think that's part of it, to make us sound crazy to people who don't care or don't want to accept that that's the reality?
Yeah, because everything's already. Everything's already in their subconscious. Like when you tell somebody about Von Braun being brought over in Operation Paperclip, in the Marvel movies, they call out Operation Paperclip by name. It's a huge plot point because you find out that the American intelligence agencies are being run by the Paperclip Nazis that were brought over. So which is literally,
I never saw them. How funny. That's crazy.
And so when people hear it, they're like, wait a second, wasn't that, I think I already heard this. It's in a movie. This is ridiculous. I'm not even going to look into it.
Jeez.
9/11. I saw that in Super Mario Bros. They
Right.
they had the buildings collapse, but yeah, there is an aspect to that. They talk about, if you want to get to the core of the philosophy, it all goes back to Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, which of course is, like we talked about with the rebranding of everything else. It's like learning physics from a Chinese school instead of an American school. It's the same actual laws, but people just put their own spin on it and they'll describe it in a different way. Maybe some people are more right about one thing than the other. But they talk about, there's one book called The Kabbalion, which is, it's technically on Hermeticism, but they just happen to choose a word that sounds exactly like Kabbalah because, again, they're very similar esoteric schools of thought.
Yep.
But they talk about there being different planes karmically. So there's these laws of karma. So, of course, karma just means action. So for each action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And they talk about there being two planes, the conscious and the subconscious. So if you can push it's like a pendulum swing is how they describe it. So you push the pendulum and you get what you want. The pendulum goes in the direction you want for a while. Take, for instance, you elect Barack Obama, push the pendulum that way.
Yep.
You can implement BLM and do all types of other things, Obamacare.
Right.
But then eventually people are going to get pissed and the pendulum's going to swing on back. And now you have the guy who Obama said, at least I will be, Obama said, you'll never be president.
Right.
And of course, Trump started his most recent political career by literally, calling out Obama not being born in the country, which, by the way, that birth certificate is actually completely fake, to the point where the publicly released birth certificate, you can load it up into Photoshop and literally remove the layers that show his birthday. There's a whole press conference that a sheriff's office did on this. But
amazing.
Anyways, that's how Trump, started his career, was this pendulum swing. And anyways, with the Kabbalah, they talk about there being two planes. So you can't push a pendulum and not have it swing back at you, but you can push there's two planes. There's the conscious and the subconscious. So you could push the pendulum on the subconscious plane and dodge it, by being conscious of it. And that's effectively what they do by showing it, by implementing it into the mass pop culture, implementing these ideas in the mass pop culture and putting it into the subconscious. These are methods talked about by Sigmund Freud and Edward Bernays. Then you can, when it happens in real life, you avoid the consequences because they've already experienced the backswing. They already know. They're already used to this idea of the Twin Towers being attacked, or in the pandemic instance of there being a pandemic.
It's like psychological
vaccine.
Right. It's almost like psychological time travel, but you don't know you're doing it. So they sent you to the future. You don't know you've been there. It's only because you've experienced it. And then when it actually happens, it's a memory from the past of the future you experienced. Does that make sense?
That's exactly correct. And that's again a core concept of not only esoteric philosophy, but of great inventors like Nikola Tesla. They talked about, obviously we have the three physical dimensions. You have the fourth dimension, which would be time, which is how we track and navigate, the movement of objects in three dimensions. Then beyond that, you have the fifth dimension, what Tesla called the luminous ether.
Right.
And, this is, again, it's not like he was the first person to say this, but, he was a big fan of Eastern esoteric thought, Buddhism and Hinduism and stuff like that, which they have these concepts in there. In Buddhist philosophy, they call it sunyata, which means nothingness, but it's not necessarily how we mean nothingness. They mean no thingness, which means there are no things. Everything is one thing. And all separation is an illusion. And basically, that concept would imply that time doesn't exist. So the only reason that we experience time is because we have a brain that can record past events. And of course, as we know, in experiments with eyewitness accounts. People haven't. There's one event that happens, but everybody remembers it in a different way. History, of course, his story. It's of course, written by the victors, which,
Right.
Basically explains all of the what we're taught in public school history.
Yeah.
So time, exactly. That's a great way of saying it. I'm going to take notes again because that's a brilliant way of explaining it.
Thanks.
Because you've already put people in the future, when it happens in the present, they're completely used to it.
It's weird that we're under such attack all the time, and like, again, going back to the way we experience the aftermath of a situation like today with the Trump assassination attempt, supposedly, because who knows? It started off with 2 people exchanged gunfire. That was the reporting coming out, right? 2 people exchanged gunfire, then turned into immediately it was actually the Secret Service shooting at a supposed assassin. And it seems like everyone's got this way of trying to manipulate your perception that it seems like we're in peak chaos. I guess we've come here many times, maybe not us. Well, yeah, I guess we have. We've experienced 9/11 and all these other things. We have, but humanity has constantly. And it's like, is there a goal, or is this just a cycle? Do we just get to this point where we explode and war breaks out and there's mass suffering, sacrifice, and it calms down and we start over? Or is there, like, do you think there's a goal beyond that at some point?
It's, everyone's just playing their role. It's, there's, again, it goes back to that core question of free will, but on some level, these people understand that there's astrological cycles. So you don't have to go esoteric with it. Everything dies. Like I said, there's seasons. Mm-hmm. Every established order, every currency dies, every government dies. And there's a transition phase. So just like Osiris was killed, and they had to have Horus as a resurrection and continuation, everything eventually falls away. So what these guys position themselves for is they position themselves correctly for the next pendulum swing. And anyone who's smart enough to consult Thoth, just like how Thoth assisted both Set and Horus, if as long as you're pretty smart and you can get in contact with Thoth and figure out, what's going on, you can position yourself to do things like, one, not submit to the most powerful propaganda and social pressure campaign of all time with the vaccine, or do other things like have knowledge of the Federal Reserve and fiat currency and buy Bitcoin early.
Right.
And both of those things, who gives a fuck what happens to the rest of the world? You can't save the rest of the world. Right. You can try and spread information, which admittedly and selfishly is what I do to make a living.
Right.
I have helped a lot of people in that regard, but that's all you can do. If you want to go to the most, the deepest level of in terms of, is there good things happening or bad things happening? There's always good and bad things happening. You can position yourself to be effective on the individual decentralized level. On the centralized level, there's always going to be cycles. Of course, the government's going to collapse eventually, and we're going to need a new form of government. So, but there is people that are specifically trying to position themselves and put things into motion that are most advantageous to them.
It seems like that's a big reason why people like Elon and Trump are in the places they are, and under the amount of fire they are too.